Okay, we should be live.
Is it just gonna be us two?
Unless IFP is joining us, I think it's only gonna be us two. But Material said he was going to ask us questions, so...
It would be a third term, but no, I am not.
Yeah, what's the... How come?
We decided to do a primary, as we have been doing, and Haldir ran. It was like 1 vote off, but he won.
Was it between you and Haldir, or was there anyone else too?
Just me and Haldir. I was kind of considering not running anyways. I do want to give other people a chance, so I'm not really, beat up about it.
How has the experience been so far, being the most active and sort of minister running the whole show, really?
I've been doing that since Mark 2. It's good. I mean, I do feel like sometimes I have an unfair influence, just being, just pushing so hard on some things. But that's just something you learn to do in the ministry.
So, Immaterial asked, what do you intend to do once you're out of office?
I'm not 100% sure right now. I would be interested in staying on as Supreme Commander, basically just General. So I might be doing that. Depends on how the ministry goes, of course. Thinking maybe running for Ledge, but I don't feel like I'd be a great fit. Might consider another auxiliary role, but kind of taking a step back for now, after having a pretty active role in the first 2 governments.
So, how do you think the executive will do without you? Can it...
I'm sure they'll be fine. I mean, I just gave them some pushes, but it's not that hard to get shit done.
Material asked, you don't have to be a minister to be Supreme Commander?
No, you don't. It's just a general appointed by the minister. The
Really?
ministry.
Is there law for that?
It's a executive procedure that I wrote.
That you wrote, yeah.
Yeah. I will note, I didn't originally call it Supreme Commander, but everyone wanted it to be called Supreme Commander. Who am I to contest that? Yeah. So, Mark 3, we had the president as general, and of course they're a figurehead of the executive. But Mark 2, we did have a completely separate general role, which was often a regular.
So, a question from Immaterial first. Do you believe that the government that would reappoint you as Supreme Commander will be elected?
It would only be the ministry, and I feel like I have good chances of, obviously been talking to people, but
who do you
it
think?
really depends on how they all feel.
Who do you think will be elected though, as ministers replacing you?
Well, I doubt we'll see the actual seats really change up right now. TU seat might be shaky. Celestial will probably gain a seat because they've learned their lesson. But, still expect to see a UP minister, still expect to see a DAO minister, IFP minister.
So,
I think the biggest chance of anything changing is Ken, if he gets elected. He had a decent showing last election.
I don't know if we will see actual parties changing positions, but I think there will be a changing of people though, since you're not
Of course.
running for re-election, and Bear has gone inactive and is replaced by some true warrior, and Joe Paris is running for justice. Did you hear that? He's not running
Who?
for Joe Parrish.
Yeah, Joe Parrish is not running anymore.
Yeah, so that's free changing. And if Kane
Yeah,
Lane,
I do think there's a good chance we go a bit more pro legislature than we were before. Just with Haldir and them hinting towards stuff like that. Haldir and I know Sun Tzu.
So you and I don't really see eye to eye on this executive versus legislative power.
Mm-hmm.
And can you understand why the legislative is frustrated that you keep vetoing our bills?
I understand why some people in the legislature would see it as not ideal. I do think it's important to preserve a balance of power, and some of the things the legislature has sent us are ridiculous in throwing that off. Some less so, but still there, and like I'm not beaten up over the fact that they're unvetoed, but it's important to have the balance of power. The legislature, just because it's slightly more democratic, doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all. You don't have to give everything to it because it gets extremely efficient very fast. Extremely inefficient. And, yeah.
I had
It's annoying to get
a debate with Ken Lane and Thorne from Progressive Union, who was here earlier in the evening, and we talked about executive versus legislative power and the veto and all that, and I said then that if you veto, that's 67%, and that's 2/3 of the game of the legislator, who represents 2/3 of the game, and that shifts the balance into the executive's favor. You if it's a controversial issue, you're going to have a hard time getting 2/3 to agree on something, and that isn't really a balance of power. That's in the executive favors, isn't it?
If it's a controversial issue, then both branches should have a say. If a bill barely passes the legislature, it's like 50%, or the minimum amount of votes it needs, and the executive says, "Oh, this is not good. This is too extreme, doesn't work," or whatever. They were elected to be a check on the legislature. That's part of their duties. Like, if they decide this is too far, it's not good, or even their parties are saying this is too far, it's not good, why shouldn't they be able to say that? Why should the ledge get to freely say whatever they want and have it be the status quo?
Why should the executive just be able to deny it? Why shouldn't the legislature?
They're not denying it. It can still be overturned. If the bill still has significant support, then it can be overturned.
Yes.
But if the executive is saying, we do not believe this is good for our community, or the game, or whatever the reason is, then they're saying the legislature has made a mistake. If the legislature as a whole decide, no, we have not made a mistake, they overturn it. Or not as a whole, as 2/3,
But you aren't really vetoing because it's unconstitutional or because it's completely
because
terrible.
it's immoral, against the balance of powers, because it's
It's not against the balance of
poorly
power.
made in many cases.
It's regulation.
A lot of cases it is.
No, not really.
Allowing the legislature to say, make its own election law. Like, that is ridiculous. It's removing the ministry's say in how they're elected, and allows a majority in the
Why
ledge
should you have
to
a
just
say in that?
take whatever. Why should the legislature have unchecked power on how they do? A majority in the legislature would then be able to do whatever they want.
It's merely a
They could say,
procedure
okay,
of how
now
many colleagues we
only-
want.
Now only IFP legislatures can be elected. That's in the election law now. Let's just say we do that.
Well-
They don't have full support in the ministry. The ministry is the check. It's removing ministry's check on the legislature. The legislature gets the check on the ministry by having the veto overturned and being able to pass bills that just totally do whatever they want, because they do have that power.
Yeah, but currently you can veto all regulations on you, and you can get away with whatever you want, except
We veto
unless
it,
we
and
get
then
2/3.
if the majority of the community, more than just barely 50% of the legislature, if they still want it, it's still done.
Yeah, but
We
that
do not
isn't
have a
always
final
easy.
vote. They're not meant to be easy. If the executive is saying this
Yeah,
isn't good,
if it
that's
isn't
still part
easy,
of the community.
then it
That's
isn't
still
balanced.
representative of the community saying this is not good, we should not do this. Why shouldn't their vote count if the legislature? Like, what gives the legislature more authority than the ministry?
The ministry.
The ministry doesn't get to pass they don't get to pass regulation on the legislature. Why shouldn't they be able to do that?
Because the legislature writes laws. The executive merely exists to play the game.
But if you're saying, what are you trying to say? Are you saying we shouldn't have a veto? Because then the legislature can just take all of our power. And then they're just as corrupt. If you're saying ministry trying to have more power is bad, why is the legislature trying to have more power good?
The legislature has more representatives. They represent.
Hardly.
Yeah, they do.
It is
There are
still
15 people.
just the politics of it. It's still the politics of, does Iron Union support this? Does Dow support this? Does IFP support this? Does Celestial support this? It's the same in both places.
Yeah, but you still got 15 people having to argue and debate and making deals to get stuff done in the legislature.
And we see and
in the executive, you have
we
just
see and
three
take into
of you
consideration
get
all
a
of that,
majority, and then
and
you
we
can
say
veto.
we feel like you came to the wrong conclusion. I don't know what to say to you, RP. Are you trying to say we shouldn't have a veto?
I'm saying you should have less power. It should be harder to veto.
Are you
At the
saying
very
we
least.
should not have a veto? Why should it be harder to veto?
That's a possibility.
And what do you mean by harder to veto? Do you mean 4/5 of the ministry?
Yeah. Ken Lane actually supported moving it to 4/5. And so do others. Because you
Then a minority of the ministry gets to speak for the ministry. The ministry loses the check. It becomes a minority. If two people don't like it, or if two people like it, they get it to pass. You should have
after a week.
a bill should support both branches, legislature and ministry. If the legislature believes the ministry has a ridiculous amount of power, we need to take this, they can force it. If the ministry believes the legislature has too much power, we can't do shit. Because you guys have decided that. And that's fair. Because it's supposed to be the democratic process. But we can still, try and stop it.
Currently, the executive is only concerned with their own ability to play in the game. You're vetoing these regulations because
We're vetoing regulations that are undemocratic. They destroy the balance of powers.
No.
They, make the game horribly inefficient to play.
They make sure you're doing your job correctly and you're not ruining our civilizations while just ignoring us.
Our job is to do it correctly.
Yeah,
Even
and
if
we want to make sure
wanted
you do.
So let's take a bill. Let's pick a bill that does something like this. For example, the Financial Regulation Act. Remember that? The ministry cannot spend money and buy stuff if it goes below this point. They have to have all of this stuff where they have to start selling stuff. It's okay to run a deficit sometimes. it's fine. It's okay to drop to 30 gold sometimes.
Yeah, but we don't want
We
that.
can handle that. But it doesn't.
The game isn't just about you.
Some people, a not super majority in the legislature, decided that, maybe this is fine, whatever, send it. But you have to realize that just makes it hard, cumbersome, and it's unreasonable.
It's not. If you want to play a regular game of Civilization, you don't have these rules, you don't have these limits, but we are a democracy and we want to hold you accountable and not just ruin our finances and waste all the money and have
It didn't
a 30
even
gold
make
deficit.
us accountable. We could eat. It literally had a clause that said we can just ignore it. So it didn't do its job at all. But people are trying to sell us like, oh, this is a check on the ministry, and them, vetoing it as well. It was just kind of dumb, and made it cumbersome.
So you're just going
And
to
added
ignore it anyway.
possible. What?
You're going to ignore it anyway at every possible moment you can, or what?
No one is that bill stopped people. It was an attempt to stop the ministry from ruining our finances and putting us into horrible financial ruin. But the ministry's not trying to do that. A common theme you see in a lot of legislation throughout all of the marks, it's we need to stop the ministry from burning the entire civilization down. That's not their goal.
It doesn't matter if it's your goal, it's to prevent you if in case you go off track and just do dumb shit. We need to have
Then it
regulations.
just adds frivolous lawsuits. It's like, oh, they spent 13 gold too much. We're ruined. We should remove all of the ministry. It's happened in past marks, and it's not fun. And it shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, but don't play them. You are accountable to the rest of us, to the legislator who represents the people. It isn't just a co-op game.
I'm saying in that sort of context, it was just unreasonable and it's not needed like that.
Immaterial asks a question for the both of you. What does it say about the ministry that the leg doesn't trust the ministers? Now you can start.
I think it's often a reactionary response. Again, this happens all the time throughout all the marks. For example, back when Scouty happened, the first Scouty, I moved 2 tiles and I didn't see a thing, and that screwed up. And then the legislature's like, okay, they can't handle themselves. Let's try and pass this bill where they have to move units one at a time. They have to check. They have to reload the save file. They just jump straight to this extreme thing. And well, that's farther on the scale than, say, the Financial Responsibility Act. It's like they often try and jump to it, and then it makes game sessions and doing all this shit just a living hell for the ministers. The legislature often thinks, oh, they made a small mistake. Let's make sure that never happens by giving them this 13 pages of bureaucratic shit to read through every session and follow, or else we sue and remove all of them. And when that kind of stuff happens, as you just said, Immaterial, flip the question, why the ministry doesn't trust the legislature. When that shit happens, it makes it kind of hard to like the legislature. When they're feels like they're your enemy sometimes.
Yeah, but you are the ones to keep vetoing the laws, and you almost never provide an answer for why you do it.
We do. Let's look at some of the stuff we vetoed. We vetoed the Government Elections and Referendums Act, which you guys overturned, because it allowed for binding referendums without any ministry approval or input. The legislature could just do this themselves. That is a direct subversion of balance of powers. It does, to be fair, go to like a referendum, but still that's abusable and unfair.
Because
So,
the people get the
five out of 5 of us said nay on it. It was still overturned with no amendment, but you know, the legislature decided that is something we need to have. Let's look at something else. Additional legislative seats. I think a lot of us that's more of a political thing. None of us felt there wasn't a need for that. Was that overturned?
Which one?
Additional legislative seats.
Can you repeat it?
Additional legislative seats act.
Yeah,
Or
we
something
overturned that one.
Yeah. The material says, how do you prevent stuff like Scouty? Both Scouties were just mistakes. The first Scouty was a mistake on my half. I went too fast and I wasn't looking very hard. That shit happens. I think, you know, we cry and we mourn and we just gotta move on, because if we try and say, you can only move one space at a time, you have to observe the full landscape and give a written 3-page report on every unit move and how it will affect the outcome of the report. When we start doing that kind of shit, you know, it gets too far.
So another criticism I had of the executive, also my own minister from my own union, Joe Bob, is that once people get inside the executive, at least with the current executive members, they start caring less about their own parties and what their own legislators support, and they go off with their own executive agenda. That only what is in the executive's interest they support, and if it isn't, they veto, even if the rest of their party support it.
I do not think saying 2 out of my 3 legislatures voted for this, that means it's my party line, is a fair statement. A lot of the times, I don't know if this is for every single party every single time, but legislators look at the bill lineup and they're like, okay, yeah, I like that. Okay, yeah, I like that. Not really that. And they just vote. They're not having a full discussion on the Star Wars Act with every member of their party.
Maybe this says more.
I know at least in my case, my executive agenda, if you want to say it like that, I have always been pretty pro-executive. That's just my viewpoint on the game. I'm obviously biased, but like that doesn't mean I'm wrong.
But take a bill such as the...
I think a lot of the times, the ministry is just like kind of vilified. Sometimes it's fair, but you know, legislature does its bullshit sometimes.
But take the additional legislative seats. That's not an anti-executive bill. Yet you vetoed it, while it doesn't even affect you.
In my case, I talked to my legislators about that. They said, I believe, Haldier said he disliked it. Pepe Spaghetti said, I didn't really care that much. And Blonde was like, I didn't really care that much. And I'm like, okay, let me think. Our Discord has been dead. There's been very little activity going on many days. We most likely will expect a drop in users. Why do we want to add more seats that we probably can't fill? It seems very unwise. I talked to my other ministers, you know, the 2 who vetoed it, Joe and Joe. They apparently thought the same, so we vetoed it. The legislature was like, no, we want these. So they did it. And that's fair.
I think the argument is that if you get more legislative seats, then you can get more of the people that are still in the community to get them
the
a job,
issue is
to keep them active.
That's not the issue. It's that we don't have enough active people. Unactive people in government positions is way worse than just unactive people. Because you have to actually count on those people. If someone is like, oh yeah, I mean, I have this weekend open, but I mean, I probably won't be active that. Like, I've seen that happen, and then we just have dead legislators who get proxied.
I'd rather we actually try before condemning it, and if it doesn't work out, then we change it back.
We don't have to experiment with it to see the potential outcome.
What if it works then?
What?
Well, it doesn't have to
The
fail.
very potential income. What I'm saying is a very potential outcome is that we end up with inactive legislatures. We really don't want that. So instead of risking it and like maybe having a whole legislature where we have 23 people, but they're super, like, 11 of them are inactive.
Okay, so we had...
Instead of risking and having that crap, then we just don't, because our current numbers are fine. If it goes down a bit, that's fine.
Yeah, so the executive for the last 2 weeks has had Joe Parrish, Bear and Fruity being pretty inactive. Does that mean we should lower the amount of executive members to 2 in that case?
Bear has been inactive. Joe has shown up to sessions, he's been there. But yeah, he's working. We're all doing that shit. The problem with lowering ministry is really 5 is like pretty much the minimal like working number. If we go to 4, then we have even, which is a hellhole. If we go to 3, that gets massive misrepresentation. So 5 is kind of been the magic number, where like for legislature the magic number always changes, and it's really depending on how many active legislatures can we get. Because really, if we have 100 people, we'll have 50 sort of active and 25 pretty active. If we have 80, we'll have 40 and 20, So you gotta kind of find the magic number, and that changes a lot more.
Yeah, but if the problem is having a too high of a number, as in the legislature, if you think 21 is going to open up to too much inactive legislator, but the same with the executive, we have 5 or do we have 6 candidates and we have 5 seats for the executive right now. If we don't get more candidates, and
I know there's more
those who win doesn't have proxies, you're gonna end up with inactive ministers. So wouldn't you have to lower it to
massive problem? That's more that we just need candidates. But we do have more candidates coming. I know. I think 6 have announced now, and then the PU guy hasn't announced yet. Okay,
Immaterial wants us to go to the Songhai questions. A war with Songhai seems to be inevitable, not necessarily soon, but very likely at some point. What would your objective be in a war with Songhai?
Where did he ask that?
Yeah, it was a bit up in the chat.
Yeah. As Supreme Commander, I would obviously listen to the, wishes of the ministry on that subject, depending on how far they want to go. We could go as far as we wanted to go. We could wipe them off the map. We could burn a few cities. I think that the annoying issue is their 2 cities they've settled are kind of crap. Raising them would be pretty bad for us, for like diplomatic reasons. But like the only city we would want to take is their capital. We do kind of want to take their capital because we need to keep expanding down there, and we don't really want Songhai to expand enough to hit on us.
As for me, I don't have any specific military strategies or tactics, but I'm of the Iron Union Party and we support very aggressive expansion. Eventually we want to unite the entire world under our banner. So yeah, we would not be simply knocking them out of the war or just pushing them back or take a city and return it or something like that. We would go for taking as many cities as possible under the circumstances and annexing them to expand our glorious empire, simply. We're not hiding that fact.
He asked if I'm not a fan of raising them, it's just siege and pillage. I mean, get 50 gold, maybe? I don't know. If we didn't want to take them, and the minister said don't raise them, probably just go for the capital. The cities are not in the way of the capital. We can probably just ignore them, and if we had to go to war, you know, put a few troops to make sure they don't back capital, if you will. But I don't think any war with them would be that difficult. We would have to continue building our military, though. I think we're definitely understaffed. And at this point, probably safe to wait for the unique crossbows.
You also vetoed the military accomplishments, goals, or whatever it was bill. Reasoning for that? Just more micromanagement again, or?
What was the MGEA?
Yeah,
Unneeded micro.
it orders you to make
read.
units. The
It didn't even force. It didn't even force us to make units. If I recall correctly, that was the one that was like.
Yeah, you can override it.
It was like upgrade your composite bowmans, which we've already done, or upgrade 2 composite bowmans, and then like research 2 military.
No, that's another one. There was 3 unit builds in total.
Could you link it for me?
Sure.
That might have been Star. I don't see Star. I don't know.
It's in chat. It's the Military Goals Establishment Act.
Oh yeah. No, this is, in my opinion, just micromanagement, because one of the powers I definitely believe the ministry should have pretty good control over is the military. Having the legislature set, you know, ratios and percentages and crap of what the composition has to be is going to be stupid. Because then, whenever we lose units, whenever we gain units, it's just going to be weird. It's going to throw stuff up. We have to wait for the bureaucracy of everything to, you know, be able to make more units and crap.
So, is there any way you would accept the legislator to order or push you to build more units?
I mean, if they passed a bill saying, like, build 2 more crossbowmen after the passing of the bill, sure, that's cool. But if it's like, you have to maintain this percentages of, you know, you need to have 4 pikemen, 4 crossbowmen, and 2 trebuchets. And if they die, you have to go rebuild. It's just, that's more micromanaging than just military expansion bill, build 2 more crossbows. What exactly do you mean by that, Miss Material?
Material asks again, how do you feel about non-micromanagement policy from the lag? I'm not entirely sure what he means by that, but more like guidelines or general policy, I guess.
I think one of the problems is, if you're not... Sometimes there's a hard time finding the line between just, like, ridiculous micromanagement and this is just a suggestion, no one cares. And I think that's because people will write it as ridiculous micromanagement and be like, yeah, that's too much. And then you say, the ministry may ignore this. So I think legislators need to, like... I don't know how to say it. Just like, I mean, they're fine to pass, just guidelines, but they're not really accomplishing anything. But if they did bills like, I could imagine the Iron Union being like, we're gonna do a military expansion bill. The ministry has to build 3 new units, however they can, within the next 2 game sessions. Unless it's completely unreasonable. But then some bills are like, the legislature may set a tech that the ministry may go for if they really want to, unless they don't.
Archwizard pinged you and asked, how about the bill that requires China to have X amount of military according to the demographic screen?
That'd be interesting. It could be we must have, you know, top 5 militaries in the world. It might be kind of annoying. I don't know what units give how much soldiers. I'd probably do that also by saying, like, if we're below this number for 15 turns, and, you know, we're not currently deep into war or something, then blah blah blah.
Immaterial asks, do you think a reward system for meeting policy goals from the leg would be preferable to the punishment system we are currently relying on?
I don't know how they would reward it, but I mean, it's fine for them to say, I don't know a good example for this. What is our best?
How about budgets then? That the leg will make a budget and says this much upkeep must go to military units per turn.
The annoying thing about that is it changes, it fluctuates, and people are gonna get mad because, you know, we had to build universities instead of building 4 more units to meet that goal. I think if it was like kind of a pseudo budget where it's like we must have at least 6 military units, and, you know, for example, the Chinese Prosperity Act, that's a great one, where it's like you have to build a paper maker within the first 3 things. Like, that's good. That's a way for them to do management, but it's not like super on our ass.
So Immaterials goes deep into the question by saying, like you get some luxuries from the marketplace if you succeed in a set target and don't if you fail.
I mean, paying minister, like, that seems kind of weird to me. I mean, paying ministers to do their job because they're just trying to do their job. That doesn't seem right to me, but I don't know.
So, going back to the veto discussion, is there any kind of veto reform you would support, or would you only like to keep the veto in its current form?
I think a 4/5 is too much, as it gives, like, I feel like if the majority of the ministry support this thing, it should happen. A 4/5 is usually used if it's like, if a majority of the ministry super duper support this super important thing. And I don't think veto is that super duper important, because it's not a final veto, it's not a full veto, they still have overturn. You know.
There are a lot of people.
I wouldn't mind if we were able to maybe like veto this part of a bill, X part of a bill, and then the legislature has to approve that and then it passes. Because like sometimes it's just one section, or sometimes one, you know, poorly worded section which has a lot of ambiguity, and it's like that's kind of a deal breaker. So for example, you know, the Elections Act had that. Like if we could just say, if this was like this, we would pass it.
Then you would likely remake the whole bill in that case. You couldn't just remove a section just pass it.
Yeah, I'm not saying like the ministry would just be like, oh, let's remove this section, now it's passed. I mean, like, they'd be like, we will approve this if you guys change this part. And then as soon as the legislature gets, half the vote to change that part, it passes.
Yeah, so is there anything else you want to talk about?
Any other questions?
Yeah, please ask us questions in the Twitch chat or GGP server or in the main server if you really want to. Or is there any question you would like to ask me, Wes? Or my party?
What powers do you personally, RB, think the ministry should be able to maintain, like, mostly autonomous from the legislature? Or even just in general?
I always support the executive to have in detail command over how exactly the details of every, like the legislator can't order you to move this unit to that part of the map.
Well,
specifically
that Military Guidelines Act was saying they set the strategy, so it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna force you to take this city, which is good enough. I was doing that. But I know you supported that bill.
Yeah. Well, I support the legislator. Like, if the executive is lagging behind, like we was earlier, the 11th of 12 largest military out of 12 civilizations, like second to last. That's not acceptable.
The thing about that, we are the human player, and that means our military is 19 times bigger than all other civs because they're AI. Also, like, we don't have any super current threats. Songhai is still separated. We told him to fuck off when he asked about our land, but like, it's not super on our back right now. Persia not on our back. We have 3 super defensible cities. Like, we're not in dire need of throwing everything into military. I do want to build up our military. I don't think we should have the 10th largest military, but it's not like having the 10th largest military is inviting them in with open arms.
Okay, so I mean, setting the general strategy, go toward to that country, send half our army in that direction. I think the legislature should be able to do that. And if you can't make your own units,
the legislature says to the or even I believe in our current system, the ministry says we want to declare war on these people. And I should say, go ahead, and then they go declare war and they do their shit. The ministry does that. Like, if you're just trying to take all of their power away, why even have a ministry? Just to do the super micromanaging things? Like, specific city production, which, I don't know, 2 weeks, someone will try and take it.
I mean, you could argue that the executive is unnecessary bureaucracy, but everything could be unnecessary bureaucracy if you want to.
The ministry is the most efficient part of the government, I believe, because the legislature has to do 48-hour voting periods. They take multiple days. The ministry sit down and in an hour get the turns out for stuff. Some stuff is predetermined. Maybe we go in already knowing what religion we want, what policies we want to pick this session. But a lot of it's like, do we want to build a water mill or an aqueduct? Do I want to move this unit and go maybe take out that barbarian camp over there, or just like sit here for a while? Hey, we got a trade offer from Persia. Do we want to accept this? Or are we going to wait for the legislature in the next, after 15 more turns, and then they tell us, and then they don't want it? Like, if it's time sensitive pretty much in any regard, it is magnitudes easier for the ministry to do it. But then, if it if you can see it coming, if we already know it's going to be there, like, we can see a war coming, so we go and do that. We can see religion coming, so we have the Rafa thing. We can see policies coming. We can see, you know, some minor things within that, like, you know, Prosperity Act, where we, you know, we see that we're going to want this stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But if you say the legislature is like, send half of your army, half over there, half of them down there. But then it turns out there's no troops to the south there. So now half of your army is there, but you have to have it there by law. And now your other half is getting decimated because it's facing the entire army. Like, that's just annoying. You can't stop it. Unless we're saying the ministry can overturn this with 3/5, in which case, why are we doing it? I mean, if the legislature had a military committee where it's like, we advise that you do this and this and this and this to take out the city. It's like, fucking sweet. It's dope. But if they're just forcing us to do certain things, that's kind of different.
You want the legislature to have a military committee?
I mean, it could be a thing. I don't think it's at all needed. Because you don't have to go that in depth with military in Civ 5 on King.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to micro for you. I think we should be able to macro. And if you don't build those units,
yeah, it's really just defining what that macro kind of is, and how. When does something turn from macro to micro? And that's just something we kind of need to communicate a bit more. Like, on a lot of things. Like diplomacy, I feel should be a mostly ministry thing. Because it is often time sensitive. If we are, you know... Announcing is kind of different because like it can cause war, and we don't really want ministry being able to cause war without legislative approval. That's one of the basic things.
It depends on what the diplomacy is. If it's making rivals, making enemies, making friends, then we need to have a legislative vote on it. But if it's just accepting a trade deal,
I think friends, it is oftentimes sensitive. Like unless the legislature have like told us not to do this, it's kind of assumed we can make friends here. You know, ministries agreeing to it. You know, representatives of the people are agreeing to it.
So, Sancho asked, Wes, are you interested in staying on as Supreme Commander and streaming the game for the Ministry?
I'm interested in staying on as Supreme Commander. I could continue to stream. I wouldn't be against it.
And a question from me. When does the IU intend to declare war on Songhai? Every day, all night, every morning, every evening, every day of the week and month. We are never advocating peace. That's your answer.
That's RB's answer. I think there's way more moderate people in IU.
Yeah, are there any more questions? Materialist writing?
Sun Tzu, do you have any more? No, you should go here. Do you have any questions about me being Supreme Commander? I mean, it would be feasible just about any time. I don't think it would be hard for us to go to war right now. I think it would be ideal to probably wait for our crossbowmen. Our unique ones that fire twice. Because they're stupid OP. And in the meantime, we can probably, you know, build up a couple more melee units. I feel like we need some. Maybe a couple more so we can leave garrisons and shit. So, are we in a position to scale to war? Right now we can pretty much just build some units and we're going to be scaled enough. We have some barracks, build more of it. It's not going to be that difficult of a task.
Sanfu asked, how would you see your role as Supreme Commander working?
I would move the units and attack the peoples that we want killed.
A really complicated
in an efficient and good way.
I think we can start wrapping up then.
Unless he may mean, like, how would it work if I'm not streaming? And then it would just be slightly less of. But I've done that in the past, and I'm good at communicating those, depending on who's streaming again.
Yeah, I think we're done. Thanks, Wes, for agreeing to this. Can you believe we have talked for an entire hour?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're currently not running for any position, but if you are, good luck, and thanks for serving our great Chinese empire.
Thank you. Goodbye.
That's it, folks. We are ending here. Thanks for watching.